We are back on Ms. Artur Diu.
And I'm Cynthia Scott.
You know what? There's a brand new approach to parenting, those unpredictable adolescents. I think we're being diplomatic here.
Yeah, perhaps. Here to talk about this is Dr. Janet Edgette, the author of Stop Negotiating with Your Teen. And there's the book right there. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we're talking about teenagers, obviously. Yes. And, you know, when it comes to manipulating, we were talking before, angry, when parents are upset with their teens, normally they do say, all right, I'll make you a deal, right?
Often
now you're
they
saying
do that.
to not do this.
To not do that. It's fine to do with a teenager who comes to the table with something, who's playing, who's a player, who's part of the family, who's accountable for his or her actions and choices. This kind of teenager is a different one. It's a tougher one. And unfortunately, it's one we're seeing more and more commonly. This kind of teenager manages to convince the parent that the parent should back off parenting, and actually punishes the parent for parenting by becoming more belligerent or more boisterous or more problematic. And so the parent feels that, well, if I back off, maybe things will settle down. The parent ends up walking on eggshells around this kind of teenager because they don't want to make things worse.
Yeah, but, you know, that's their job, to discipline teenagers. When did, you know, Doctor, I recall, you know, we didn't have these problems a generation ago. Our parents were the rulers of the household. Right. End of discussion. I know children are a lot more spoiled, but there's got to be more to it these days.
I think there is more to it. I think a few things. I think one is we've really bought into this, I believe it's a myth that somehow teenagers are supposed to be this way. So we kind of wink wink or dismiss it as, well, you know, teenagers are moody, so what gets what happens is that teenagers' moodiness becomes an excuse for them to become rude. And so rather than, you know, you'll have a teenager who's sort of sneering and snarling around the house and snapping at everybody, and rather than the parents saying, you can't do that around here, you just don't do that, they say, well, yeah, she's a teenager, what do I expect? She's 14, she's 16, and it gets dismissed as that. And I think that's one problem. And I think another one is we've become a very child-oriented society, and I think that could be a very good thing. The problem is we haven't really established good guidelines in terms of parenting. How can we help develop good kids and teenagers who are responsible for their actions and have a sense of accountability? It's too indulgent. It's too much giving without asking from them.
But isn't it easy to just blame it on the fact that she's a teenager?
It's too easy. I mean, it's too easy, and that's what happens. And parents need to stand the ground. The problem is that there's so many who are overwhelmed and beleaguered, and the kid is challenged them so relentlessly that they give up. You know, and they say, I just can't handle, do what you want. And they don't realize they need to stand the ground, remove the privileges, take the car away, take the internet, the computer, the phone, and even be willing to be inconvenienced in ways in which the parent chooses rather than in ways in which the adolescent imposes. So if it means sweeping up all the phones in the house and bringing them to work with you because you know your teen will be at home in the afternoon racking up the phone bill, then you need to do that.
Right. There also seems to be a component of moms and dads, and there are a lot of us baby boomers with teenagers now, so the ratio has changed a little bit. It seems like our generation, and I know I'm painting with a very broad brush here, we don't want to grow up. We want to be our children's best friend. We forget the role of parent.
That's a wonderful point. I think it's so true. And I think when parents do that, they lose an enormous amount of credibility in their teenagers' eyes. And so they don't realize that they can't buddy up to their teenager or try and capture the adolescence that they wanted but never had, or try and solicit their teen's approval, or that get their teenager to like them. That's not going to make their teenager behave. It's just going to get their teenager to dismiss their authority as a parent. It's not a good way to do that.
It's got to be tough rules and tough love.
That's
basically.
right. But at the same time, it could be very compassionate, very affectionate. The parent needs to stay accessible, because as soon as the parent becomes all discipline and all rules and inaccessible emotionally as a person, the kid turns off, and understandably so.
And you know, a lot of what you're telling us today sounds like old school in a sense. You know, are teens just different now than
they're a little
we were years ago?
cagier, a little wiser, a little savvier, and parents are more overwhelmed and beleaguered, and it's easier for them to say, I can't deal with this right now. I'll deal with it later. And later becomes next month, next year, and all of a sudden you have a kid who's ruling the roost, and you have a kid who you love but you don't like.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's that's key. Doctor, we thank you for your time, Dr. Janet Edgette. Obviously a new approach, because we've always been told, let's find that compromise, let's negotiate it.
Right.
But I guess these are the extreme cases where we really have to take the bull by the horn and say enough is enough.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, and your kids will love you more for it.
They
really,
will. They
in the
will.
end.
They want it. They need it.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time. I'm going to keep this because my daughter's 11 and she's starting to mutate
She's
now.
on her way.
Okay? I love her to death, but you know. Thank you very much, Doctor. We'll be back. James now with another check of the weather.